Why is General Motors leaving the U.S.? The real cost of tariffs on the American auto industry. What happens when a company that has symbolized American strength for over a century begins to turn its back on the very soil it helped build? That is the question facing General Motors, the largest automaker in the United States and a historical pillar of Detroit's Motor City. The answer is both simple and complex. Tariffs. This week, the CEO of General Motors, GM, delivered a sobering warning about the consequences of U.S. tariff policies. The statement followed an earlier announcement that the automaker would halt some of its production in the United States. The economic and social effects of this decision have quickly rippled through the auto industry and beyond, with GM placing a clear dollar figure on the cost of these tariffs: $5 billion. The company has drawn a direct line between recent trade policies and its drastic shift in production plans. GM's legacy and the turning point. For decades, General Motors has stood as a testament to American industrial success, known for its vital contributions during war years, a wide variety of consumer models, and its role in providing millions of jobs. GM was an integral part of the nation's economic story, but this image has begun to change. The introduction of steep tariffs on imported steel and aluminum under the America First trade strategy has triggered a complex chain reaction throughout the automotive industry. These tariffs, introduced during President Donald Trump's administration, were meant to protect the U.S. metal industry. Steel and aluminum are, however, also fundamental to automakers, industries that heavily rely on globally sourced parts. As tariffs raise the cost of these raw materials, car makers like GM found themselves caught in a vice of mounting expenses and retaliatory measures from trade partners. The price of protectionism. GM's internal analysis shows that tariffs are adding billions of dollars to its operating costs. While the company pays extra duties to import steel and aluminum into the U.S., it also faces new export barriers in foreign markets. Countries such as China, Canada, Mexico, and those in the European Union have responded to U.S. tariffs by imposing their own on American-made vehicles. This dual blow, higher costs for materials and restricted access to international markets, has put GM under significant financial pressure. Board members were left with few choices to preserve the company's long-term strategy, especially in areas like electric vehicle, EV development and research. They decided to shift production overseas. A tough call. The shutdown begins. The first visible consequence of GM's decision is the production halt of its Bright Drop electric delivery vans. The affected plant is in Ingersoll, Ontario, Canada. While the shutdown is temporary and expected to last until at least October, it means an immediate layoff of 500 workers, almost half the unionized workforce at the facility. On the American side, towns and cities with economies tied to GM are facing an uncertain future. The Bright Drop vans were considered central to GM's electric future. Now, delays could reduce the company's competitive edge in a rapidly evolving industry. The effect will be felt far beyond GM's corporate walls, from toolmakers and machine suppliers to transportation firms and component manufacturers. More than just tariffs. Although tariffs play a major role, GM leadership has clarified that this decision stems from a variety of issues. These include unpredictable regulatory shifts, disruptions in the supply chain, and the increasing urgency of transitioning from gasoline-powered to electric vehicles. According to CEO Mary Barra and other GM board members, remaining in the U.S. under current trade conditions would compromise not just profitability, but the company's survival. In response, GM is not just leaving a few factories idle. It is redrawing its global production map. New investments are being made in Mexico, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Eastern Europe. These locations offer more stable trade environments, lower labor costs, and better alignment with GM's electric vehicle goals. The fallout: workers and communities. Left behind, the human impact of GM's shift is immense. Thousands of workers are at risk of losing their jobs. Cities in Michigan and the Midwest that were built on the back of GM plants now face a grim period of adjustment. Union leaders who have long worked in partnership with the company see this move as a betrayal. They argue that workers are being sacrificed for shareholder satisfaction. Meanwhile, local governments and regulatory bodies are scrambling to introduce support packages for affected employees. However, these measures are unlikely to reverse the underlying damage to communities that relied heavily on the automaker's presence. The cascading effect spreads across entire supply chains, from raw material providers to dealerships. GM's global gamble. While GM expands abroad, it faces new challenges. Each region brings its own regulatory environment, labor laws, and cultural expectations. Rebuilding a supply chain from the ground up will take time, investment, and coordination. Moreover, critical questions remain unanswered. Where will research and innovation take place? What happens to the engineers and technicians currently based in the US? Though GM plans to tap into global tech hubs, especially in Asia and Europe, it will also face intense competition. Strategic partnerships will be key, but these moves do not come without risk. Unstable trade regions, potential health crises, and further geopolitical disruptions could complicate operations in the future. Political reactions and public opinion. Unsurprisingly, GM's decision has ignited political debate. President Trump criticized the move, claiming that it undermines efforts to strengthen domestic manufacturing. Lawmakers are now considering legislative steps to prevent such large-scale corporate shifts out of the country. Some argue that the tariffs, originally meant to protect American industry, have backfired and are now driving it away. Public sentiment is mixed. Many Americans feel a sense of loss. For generations, GM wasn't just a car manufacturer. It was a symbol of national pride and unity. From World War II, veterans who remember GM's war contributions to sports fans waving flags at NASCAR races sponsored by Chevrolet, the company was deeply woven into the country's identity. A new era for the auto industry. Trade analysts say GM's departure may trigger a broader realignment of the automotive sector in the US. Other companies, observing GM's exit, may also begin to reconsider their production strategies. If the trend continues, the country could witness one of the largest waves of industrial relocation in its history. However, leaving the US doesn't guarantee smooth sailing for GM. With each new facility abroad comes a new set of challenges: compliance, logistics, cultural adaptation, and political risks. Balancing a multinational operation while maintaining a connection to the US market will be difficult. The future of Detroit, an American manufacturing Detroit, once the beating heart of American industry, now stands at a crossroads. For many, GM's decision feels like the end of an era. The city and its surrounding regions will need to find new models for economic growth. Policymakers are now confronted with an urgent question. How can the US foster a climate where innovation and profitability coexist with domestic job creation? General Motors' restructuring may offer financial resilience in the long term, but it also exposes the fragility of globally intertwined industries. Tariffs, trade disputes, and political instability can swiftly disrupt even the most iconic companies. Conclusion: in the end, General Motors' departure from US-based production marks one of the most significant repositionings in modern automotive history. What was meant to protect American manufacturing through tariffs has instead accelerated its departure. GM is shifting its focus to new global markets, but the cost is being borne by thousands of workers and dozens of American towns. The story of GM is no longer just about vehicles. It's about global economics, trade policy, technological evolution, and national identity. As the company sets its sights abroad, it leaves behind more than shuttered plants. It leaves a deep question in the American conscience. In a globalized world, can we still build our future at home? Stay informed. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and follow us for more in-depth coverage of today's most important economic transformations.